My wife chose her phone over me for months, giggling at texts from her male friends while I sat ignored in our own living room. When I finally said, "Not anymore," she laughed and called it growth. 3 weeks later, I accepted a job 2 states away and started packing in secret while she remained glued to her screen, completely oblivious. Silence speaks louder. Look, I'm Marcus Hill, 29 years old, and I coordinate logistics for a living. That means I'm pretty damn good at spotting when things are out of place, when systems are breaking down, when the whole operation is about to go tits up. So trust me when I tell you that Saturday night, October 15th, I watched my marriage flatline in real time, and there wasn't a single thing I could do to resuscitate it. We'd planned this movie night for weeks. Well, I'd planned it. Sabrina had mumbled something that sounded like agreement while scrolling through her phone, which had become her default response to pretty much everything I said these days. But hey, I'm an optimist, or maybe just a sucker for punishment, so I went all out. Picked up her favorite Thai takeout from that place downtown that charges $23 for pad Thai because they use authentic organic ingredients or some bullshit. Grabbed a bottle of that wine she likes, the one that tastes like it was filtered through a unicorn's dreams and costs more than my car payment. Hell, I even dimmed the lights and queued up The Princess Bride because she'd mentioned wanting to watch it again about 6 months ago. 6 months. Jesus, that should have been my first red flag right there. So there we were, settled on our couch. Well, my couch, since I'd bought the damn thing. With our overpriced noodles getting cold and Inigo Montoya preparing to avenge his father's death for the 1000th time. And that's when her phone started its evening serenade. Buzz buzz, buzz buzz buzz, like a mosquito that had learned Morse code and decided to practice symphonies. At first, I tried to ignore it. Really, I did. But watching your wife's face light up like a Christmas tree every time that screen glowed while she sat next to you feeling about as warm as a corpse in winter, that'll eat at you faster than acid through aluminum. She'd glance down, and boom, there it was. That smile. You know the one I'm talking about. The private, secret smile that used to be mine. The one that meant someone had just made her day a little brighter, had just said something clever or funny or sweet. Except now it wasn't me causing it. It was whoever the hell was on the other end of that digital leash. "Adrian's having such a rough time with his breakup," she'd murmur, fingers flying across the screen. Giggle. "Oh my god, Blake is so funny." Giggle giggle. "Jordan just sent the cutest meme." Giggle giggle snort. Meanwhile, Wesley was climbing the cliffs of insanity, and I was sitting there feeling like I was the one about to fall off a fucking cliff. $23 pad Thai congealing in my lap, watching my wife have intimate conversations with 3 different guys while pretending I didn't exist. And here's the kicker. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Gone were the days of, "Oh, just checking something real quick," or "Sorry, work emergency." Nope. She was full-on giggling, typing novels, reacting to whatever digital comedy show these guys were putting on for her benefit. I could have stripped naked, painted myself blue, and started doing jumping jacks, and she might have glanced up long enough to ask me to keep it down because she was trying to concentrate. The credits started rolling. You know how long movie credits are these days? Forever. They list everyone down to the guy who brought coffee to the assistant director's cousin. And Sabrina? Still typing away, still giggling, still existing in whatever parallel universe her phone had become. The music swelled, all dramatic and final, and I just sat there like a jackass, waiting for my own wife to notice that the movie we'd supposedly watched together was over. 10 minutes of credits. Then another 10 of that black screen with the HBO logo. I started timing it because, hey, logistics coordinator, I time everything. That's when you really know your life has gone sideways. When you're sitting in your own living room, timing how long it takes your spouse to acknowledge your existence. 23 minutes. 23 goddamn minutes of watching her live her best life with 3 guys who weren't her husband, while her actual husband sat there feeling like furniture. Less than furniture, actually. At least furniture serves a purpose. Finally, she looked up, and you know what she said? "Oh, is it over already?" Like she'd just noticed the TV was on. Like we hadn't been sitting there together for 2 hours. Like I was some random roommate who'd wandered into her personal phone booth. "Yeah," I said. "It's over." And that's when it hit me, sitting there in the glow of her phone screen, listening to the silence that had somehow become louder than any argument we'd ever had. I wasn't her husband anymore. Husbands get attention, consideration, basic human acknowledgement. What I was getting was the treatment you'd give a lamp, functional when needed, otherwise invisible. I was background noise in my own marriage. White noise. The kind of constant, meaningless sound that people learn to tune out so completely they forget it's even there. And the scariest part? I was starting to forget I was there too. That night, lying in bed while she finished up her digital social hour, I stared at the ceiling and realized something that chilled me to the bone. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't a phase. This was my new normal, and it was only going to get worse. Because when someone shows you that their phone is more interesting than your presence, when they can ignore you for nearly half an hour while you're sitting right next to them, they're not just being rude. They're telling you exactly where you stand in their list of priorities. And brother, I wasn't even making the top 10. The silence that night told me everything I needed to know. It told me I was already gone. I just hadn't packed my bags yet. 3 years of marriage. 36 months. 1,095 days of till death do us part. And let me tell you something. By month 30, I was pretty sure the death part was going to come from me strangling myself with my own wedding ring. But it wasn't always like this. Oh no, that would have been too easy. If Sabrina had been a nightmare from day one, I would have bailed faster than a Wall Street trader during a market crash. The cruel joke is that she used to be amazing. Like, genuinely amazing. The kind of woman who'd put her phone on silent during dinner without being asked, who'd actually listen when I told her about my day instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. She used to laugh at my stupid jokes, and I mean really laugh. Not that polite little chuckle you give your boss when he thinks he's funny. We'd have these marathon conversations that would stretch from dinner until 2 in the morning, talking about everything and nothing. Our dreams, our fears, whether aliens existed, why hot dogs come in packs of 10, but buns come in packs of 8. Deep philosophical shit, you know? She'd curl up against me on the couch, her phone forgotten on the coffee table like some ancient relic from a bygone era. Those were the days when I actually mattered, when I was the most interesting thing in her world. Then came the reunion. 6 months ago, Sabrina got a Facebook message that changed everything. Her college crew was getting back together for some Nostalgia Fest weekend in Chicago. Adrian, Blake, and Jordan, the holy trinity of my marital destruction. These weren't just any college friends, mind you. These were her people, her squad, the guys she'd spent 4 years partying with, studying with, probably doing God knows what else with that I didn't want to think about too hard. At first, I was actually happy for her. I mean, reconnecting with old friends is healthy, right? That's what all those relationship articles and magazines tell you. Maintain your individual friendships. Don't lose yourself in your marriage. All that Dr. Phil bullshit that sounds great in theory, but turns into a nightmare when your wife starts treating her husband like he's interrupting her real life. The weekend trip was just the beginning. She came back glowing, talking nonstop about how amazing it was to catch up with everyone, how they'd picked up right where they left off, how these guys really got her in ways nobody else did. And stupid me, I smiled and nodded like the supportive husband I was trying to be, even though something in my gut was already sending up flares. Then came the group chat. Jesus Christ, the group chat. If I could go back in time and prevent one invention, forget the atomic bomb, I'd wipe out group messaging. That innocent little notification sound became the soundtrack to my marriage's slow, agonizing death. Morning, noon, and night, it was buzz, 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 and every single time, Sabrina would light up like she'd just won the lottery. Adrian's having drama with his girlfriend again, she'd say, fingers already flying across the screen. Or Blake just posted the funniest thing about his coworkers. Or my personal favorite, Jordan needs advice about whether to take that job in Denver. And here's where it gets really fun. I started keeping track. Yeah, that's right. I went full psycho husband and started timing how long these quick responses took. What started as 30-second replies turned into 5-minute conversations, then 10, then 20. I'd come home from busting my ass coordinating shipments all day, looking forward to seeing my wife, and she'd be sprawled on our couch having deep, meaningful conversations with 3 guys who lived in different time zones. Dinner became a spectator sport. I'd be trying to tell her about my day, how Jenkins in accounting was being a dick again, or how we'd solved that shipping nightmare with the Portland warehouse, and she'd be nodding along while her thumbs worked overtime. Buzz buzz. Giggle. Sorry, what were you saying? Buzz buzz. Oh my God, you guys have to see this. And then she'd show me some inside joke that made zero sense because I wasn't part of their little digital clubhouse. I tried being patient. I really did. When she'd spend our entire Netflix session texting, I'd just turn up the volume. When she'd ignore me during dinner, I'd clear my throat and crack jokes until she looked up. When she'd roll over in bed to answer a message at 11 p.m., I'd just close my eyes and pretend it didn't bother me. But here's the thing about patience. It's not infinite. It's more like a gas tank, and mine was running on fumes. The worst part was watching her come alive for them in ways she hadn't for me in months. These guys would send her some random meme or stupid video, and she'd burst into laughter so genuine and joyful that it made my chest ache. When was the last time I'd made her laugh like that? When was the last time anything I said got more than a distracted hum while she typed away? They became her emotional support system. Adrian would have girlfriend problems, and suddenly Sabrina was a relationship counselor, spending hours walking him through his feelings. Blake would complain about work, and she'd become his career advisor. Jordan would share some random life update, and she'd respond with the enthusiasm of a game show host. Meanwhile, I was right there. Her actual husband. The guy who'd held her hair when she had food poisoning, who'd stayed up all night when her mom was in the hospital, who'd given up my dream job in Seattle because she didn't want to leave her hometown. But apparently, I was chopped liver compared to these three digital princes who could command her attention with a single ping. The breaking point came during what should have been our anniversary dinner. I'd made reservations at that fancy steakhouse downtown, the one where they charge $50 for a piece of meat the size of a credit card. We're sitting there, candles flickering, and she's got her phone face up on the table like it's a fourth guest. Every few minutes, buzz, and her eyes would dart down. Can we maybe put the phone away? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Just for dinner. She looked at me like I'd asked her to cut off her arm. It's just the group chat. I'll put it on silent. Silent. Not away. Silent. Because God forbid she miss a single precious moment of whatever earth-shattering conversation they were having about protein powder or cryptocurrency or whatever the hell 30-year-old guys talk about in group chats. That's when I realized I wasn't fighting for my wife's attention anymore. I was competing with it, and I was losing. Badly. You know what they say about the road to hell being paved with good intentions? Well, my road to divorce was paved with one polite conversation that went nuclear faster than Chernobyl. It was a Tuesday night in early September, and I'd had what you might call an epiphany during my commute home. Sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on I-95, listening to some podcast about healthy communication in relationships, I decided to be the mature adult in this situation. No more passive-aggressive throat clearing during dinner. No more dramatic sighs when her phone buzzed for the 15th time in an hour. I was going to have a real, honest conversation with my wife about how her constant texting was affecting our marriage. Revolutionary concept, right? I rehearsed it the whole drive home. Keep it gentle, I told myself. Use I statements. Don't sound accusatory. Just express how you feel and work together toward a solution. All that therapy speak bullshit that sounds so reasonable when you're stuck in traffic, but becomes a lot harder when you're actually facing the person who's been treating you like a houseplant for the past 6 months. I walked into our apartment around 7:30, and there she was in her natural habitat. Sprawled across the couch, phone in hand, that familiar glow reflecting off her face like she was staring into the fucking burning bush. The TV was on, some reality show about people who hoard cats or something equally mindless, but she wasn't watching it. She was deep in whatever digital wonderland the boys had created for her that evening. Hey, babe, I said, setting my keys down extra loudly. How was your day? She replied without looking up. Classic Sabrina response number 1. Not even words anymore. Just sounds that vaguely resembled human communication. I took a deep breath and dove in. So, I was thinking we could talk about something. Her thumbs kept moving. Sure, what's up? Well, it's about the texting thing. I feel like maybe we could. Hold on, she interrupted, holding up one finger while she finished typing some earth-shattering message that was apparently more important than her husband trying to have a conversation. Sorry, Adrian's really going through it right now. Adrian. Of fucking course it was Adrian. The guy was like emotional quicksand. Every time Sabrina tried to help him with his perpetual girlfriend drama, she'd sink a little deeper into his bullshit and a little further away from our marriage. I waited, and waited, watching her type what looked like a novella while I stood there like an idiot holding my briefcase. Finally, after what felt like 17 hours but was probably 3 minutes, she looked up with that expectant expression people get when they're pretending they've been paying attention the whole time. Sorry, you were saying? Here goes nothing, I thought. I was saying that I think maybe we could set some boundaries around phone time. Not anything crazy, just maybe during dinner or when we're trying to have conversations. It feels a little overwhelming when. And that's when she hit me with the look. You know the one. Eyebrows raised, head tilted slightly to the side, like I'd just suggested we sacrifice a goat in the living room. Overwhelming. Yeah, I mean, when you're texting constantly, it's hard to. Are you seriously telling me I can't talk to my friends? Okay, hold up. That's not what I said. Not even close. But somehow, in the span of 2 seconds, my gentle request for some phone-free time had been transformed into me being a controlling asshole who wanted to isolate her from everyone she cared about. It was like watching a magician, except instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, she'd pulled a victim complex out of thin air. That's not what I'm saying at all, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. I'm just asking for maybe some time when we're both present with each other. Like, when we're eating dinner or watching a movie together. She actually laughed. Not a happy laugh. One of those sharp, dismissive laughs that cut through the air like a blade. You're jealous of my friends. That's what this is about. Jealous. The word hit me like a slap. I'm not jealous, I'm just. You're being controlling, Marcus. And there it was. The nuclear option. The word that no husband wants to hear, especially when he's trying to save his marriage. Controlling. She said it with such confidence, such conviction, like she'd been waiting for the perfect moment to deploy it. Controlling? I repeated, feeling something shift inside my chest. Wanting to have dinner with my wife without competing with 3 guys on her phone is controlling. Yes, she snapped, sitting up straighter on the couch. You want to dictate when I can talk to my friends and when I can't. That's literally the definition of controlling behavior. I stood there, briefcase still in my hand like some kind of suburban statue, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. Was I being controlling? Was wanting my wife's attention during the few hours we had together each day really such an unreasonable request? Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was asking too much. But then she kept talking, and any doubt I had evaporated like steam. These are important friendships, Marcus. Adrian is going through a really rough breakup, and he needs support. Blake is dealing with work stress. And Jordan. What about me? I interrupted. What about what I need? She blinked at me like I'd just spoken in ancient Greek. What do you mean? I mean, when do I get to be important? When do I get to be the person you want to talk to and laugh with and support? Her phone buzzed. Her eyes immediately darted down to it, and I watched her face light up with that familiar smile. Without thinking, she started to reach for it. Don't, I said quietly. She froze, her hand halfway to the phone. Don't what? Don't pick it up. For once, just don't pick up the fucking phone while we're having a conversation about how you never put down the fucking phone. You're being ridiculous, she said, but there was something different in her voice now. A hint of defensiveness that told me she knew exactly what she'd been about to do. Am I? Really? Because I just asked you for 5 minutes of your attention, and you literally cannot go 5 minutes without checking what your boyfriends are up to. They're not my boyfriends, she said, but the protest sounded weak even to her. Aren't they? Because you sure as hell treat them better than you treat your actual husband. The silence that followed was deafening. We stared at each other across our living room, and I could see something shifting in her expression. Not guilt. I wish it had been guilt. It was irritation, annoyance. Like I was the unreasonable one for pointing out that she'd rather text with other men than talk to her husband. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't even hesitate. She grabbed it and started typing. I can't deal with this right now, she muttered. You're being paranoid and controlling, and I need advice. From who? I asked, though I already knew the answer. People who actually care about my well-being. And that's when something inside me died. Not dramatically, not with fireworks or tears. It just quietly flatlined, like a heart monitor when the patient finally gives up. Right, I said softly. People who care about your well-being. She was already lost in her phone again, typing away to her trinity of emotional support. Probably telling them all about her controlling husband who had the audacity to want her attention for 10 minutes. I walked to our bedroom, set down my briefcase, and sat on the edge of the bed. The word controlling kept echoing in my head, but it wasn't making me doubt myself anymore. It was making me angry, because I knew what controlling looked like, and it wasn't asking your spouse to put their phone down during dinner. Controlling was convincing someone that their reasonable requests were unreasonable. Controlling was making your partner feel guilty for wanting basic respect and attention. Controlling was rewriting reality so thoroughly that the victim starts to question their own sanity. And sitting there in our bedroom, listening to her giggle at whatever Adrian or Blake or Jordan had just said, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. I wasn't the one being controlling in this marriage. She was. 3 weeks before I officially became a ghost in my own marriage, the universe decided to throw me a curveball that would change everything. It came in the form of my boss, Dave Martinez, sticking his head into my cubicle at 4:30 on a Wednesday afternoon with that look on his face. The one that usually meant either really good news or really bad news, with no middle ground. Bill, you got a minute? Need to talk to you about something. I saved the spreadsheet I'd been working on, some mind-numbing inventory report that would probably sit in someone's inbox for 6 months before being deleted, and followed Dave to his office. The guy had been my supervisor for 3 years, and in all that time, I'd never seen him this jittery. He was practically bouncing in his chair like a kid who'd had too much Mountain Dew. So, he said, leaning back and grinning like he'd just won the lottery, how do you feel about Chicago? Chicago. The word hit me like a brick. What about Chicago? Corporate's opening a new distribution center there. Big operation, twice the size of what we're running here. They need someone to head up operations management, and your name came up. He slid a folder across his desk. Operations manager, Marcus. 40% pay bump, full relocation package, company car. The whole 9 yards. I opened the folder, and the numbers staring back at me made my eyes water. Not just the salary, though Jesus, that was nice, but everything else. Moving expenses covered, temporary housing, even money for a house hunting trip. This wasn't just a promotion, it was a complete life upgrade. When would they need an answer? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. 2 weeks, Dave said. I know it's fast, but they want to get this thing rolling by January. You interested? Interested? 6 months ago, I would have been doing backflips. A chance to run my own operation, to actually use the logistics degree I'd busted my ass for, to make real money for the first time in my adult life. This was the kind of opportunity that comes around once in a career, if you're lucky. But 6 months ago, I was still married to a woman who gave a shit about my existence. Yeah, I heard myself saying, yeah, I'm definitely interested. Dave grinned and stuck out his hand. That's what I wanted to hear. Take the paperwork home, talk it over with Sabrina, and let me know by Friday. Talk it over with Sabrina. Right. That should be fun. I drove home in a daze, the folder sitting on my passenger seat like a winning lottery ticket. This was it. This was my shot. Our shot. I corrected myself, though the thought felt hollow. A chance to start fresh somewhere new. To maybe salvage whatever was left of our marriage by getting away from the digital love triangle that had taken over our lives. I walked into our apartment around 6, and there was Sabrina in her usual position, horizontal on the couch, phone glued to her face, completely absorbed in whatever earth-shaking conversation was happening in the group chat. The TV was playing some cooking show she wasn't watching, and there were takeout containers on the coffee table from lunch that she hadn't bothered to clean up. Hey, babe, I said, setting my keys down extra loudly. I've got some news. Came the predictable response. Not even a glance in my direction. I stood there for a moment, folder in hand, watching her thumbs fly across the screen. She was completely lost in it, smiling, typing, pausing to read responses, typing again. It was like watching someone have an affair in real time, except the other people weren't even in the same state. Sabrina. Just a sec, she said, holding up one finger. Adrian's telling us about his date last night. Adrian's date. Of course. Because Adrian's romantic escapades were clearly more important than whatever news her husband might have. I waited. 5 minutes turned into 10. 10 turned into 15. I could see her screen from where I was standing. She wasn't just responding to messages. She was actively participating in some elaborate discussion about this woman Adrian had met at a coffee shop. Offering advice, asking follow-up questions, invested in this stranger's love life in ways she hadn't been invested in her own marriage for months. That's when something inside me snapped. Not dramatically, More like a rubber band that's been stretched too far for too long, finally giving up. A quiet, almost relieved kind of snap. You know what? I said, sitting down in the chair across from her. Take your time. I'll wait. Something in my tone must have registered because she finally looked up, blinking like she'd just realized I was in the room. What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong. I just have some potentially life-changing news to share with my wife. But hey, Adrian's dating life is obviously more pressing. She rolled her eyes, actually rolled her fucking eyes, and went back to her phone. Don't be dramatic. I'm almost done. Almost done with what? It's a group chat, Sabrina. It never ends. There's always going to be another message, another crisis, another reason why 3 guys you haven't seen in person for 6 months are more important than your husband. You're being ridiculous, she said, but I could see her typing again. Am I? Because I'm sitting here with news that could change our entire future, and you literally cannot stop texting long enough to hear it. She sighed, the kind of exaggerated sigh you'd give a toddler who was interrupting your important adult conversation. Fine. What's your news? But here's the thing, I was done. Something about the way she said fine, like she was doing me this enormous favor by acknowledging my existence, just broke whatever last thread of hope I'd been clinging to. Actually, never mind, I said, standing up. Go back to your boyfriends. They're not my, she started, then stopped. What did you just call them? Your boyfriends. Because that's what they are, isn't it? 3 guys who get all your attention, all your emotional energy, all your best smiles and laughs and conversations. The only difference between them and actual boyfriends is that you're not fucking them. Yet, her face went white. How dare you? How dare I what? Point out that you treat 3 random guys better than you treat your own husband? That you'd rather spend every waking moment talking to them than have a 5-minute conversation with me? She was fully sitting up now, phone forgotten for the first time in weeks. You're jealous. You've always been jealous of my friends. You asked me that before, I said quietly. A few weeks ago, asked if I was jealous of your friends. And you said, I said yes. But you know what, Sabrina? I looked her straight in the eye, and for the first time in months, I felt completely calm. Not anymore. She blinked, confusion replacing the anger on her face. What? Not anymore. I'm not jealous of your friends anymore. You know what? She just stared at me. Because being jealous would require me to still want what they have. And I don't. I don't want your attention anymore. I don't want your best smiles, or your laughter, or your deep conversations. I don't want to compete with a fucking phone for my wife's affection. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Her phone buzzed on the couch beside her, and for the first time in months, she didn't immediately reach for it. Not anymore, I repeated. I'm done wanting things from someone who's made it crystal clear I don't matter. She laughed, actually laughed. Not the sharp, dismissive laugh from our last fight, but something lighter, almost relieved. Good. That's growth, Marcus. See, this is good. I told you this whole jealousy thing wasn't healthy. Growth. She called it growth. I stared at her. This woman I'd married 3 years ago. This stranger who was sitting in my living room celebrating the fact that her husband had stopped caring about her. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Yeah, I said softly. Growth. I walked to our bedroom, closed the door, and pulled out my laptop. The corporate email was easy to compose, just a few lines accepting the position and requesting the relocation paperwork. I hit send before I could change my mind. From the living room, I could hear her phone buzzing again, followed by that familiar giggle that used to make my heart skip. Now it just sounded like noise, background static from a life I was already starting to leave behind. Growth, I thought. Yeah, Sabrina. This is definitely growth. You know what's funny about coordinating logistics for a living? You get really good at planning complex operations without anyone noticing what you're doing. Moving thousands of pounds of inventory from point A to point B requires precision, timing, and above all, the ability to execute a plan so smoothly that everyone involved thinks it just happened naturally. Turns out those same skills come in handy when you're planning to disappear from your own marriage. That night, after Sabrina celebrated my emotional detachment like I'd just won a fucking Nobel Prize, I lay in bed listening to her tap away on her phone and started doing what I do best, logistics. Step 1 was accepting the Chicago position, which I'd already done. Step 2 was figuring out how to extract myself from this train wreck without her noticing until it was too late to stop it. The irony was beautiful, in a twisted way. For months, she'd been so absorbed in her digital love triangle that she'd completely stopped paying attention to anything I did, which meant I could basically plan a military operation right under her nose, and as long as I didn't interrupt her texting time, she'd never notice. I started small, research mode, just like any logistics project. I pulled up apartment listings in Chicago on my laptop, bookmarking places that looked decent and weren't too far from the new distribution center. One-bedroom apartments, not two-bedroom, because this wasn't about us anymore. This was about me. Marcus Hill, operations manager, starting fresh in a city where nobody knew about my epic marriage failure. The housing market in Chicago was brutal, but the relocation package was generous enough to make it work. I could afford something nice, maybe even in one of those high-rise buildings downtown with a gym and a doorman. The kind of place I'd always wanted but never suggested because Sabrina would have called it pretentious while she was half listening and texting her boys. Phase 2 was the apartment itself. Our lease was month to month, something we'd agreed on last year when Sabrina couldn't decide if she wanted to move to a bigger place. Another stroke of luck, because breaking a long-term lease would have been complicated and expensive. Instead, I just had to give 30 days notice to our landlord, Mr. Peterson, who was probably going to throw a party when we moved out anyway. We weren't exactly his favorite tenants, mainly because Sabrina had a habit of playing music too loud when she was having video calls with her trinity of emotional support. The timing had to be perfect. Corporate wanted me in Chicago by the 1st of January, which gave me about 6 weeks to execute this whole operation. I needed to give notice on the apartment, arrange for movers, set up utilities in Chicago, and somehow do all of this without my wife, who lived 3 feet away from me, catching on. But here's the thing about people who are completely self-absorbed. They don't notice anything that doesn't directly affect them. And since Sabrina had basically written me off as wallpaper months ago, I was pretty much invisible anyway. I started with the apartment hunt. During my lunch breaks, I'd call Chicago landlords and schedule virtual tours. Yeah, I'm relocating for work, I'd tell them. Looking for something available January 1st. Just me, not we. The words felt strange at first, then liberating. No more negotiating about neighborhoods or amenities or whether the kitchen was big enough for 2 people who barely spoke to each other anyway. Meanwhile, at home, Sabrina continued her regularly scheduled programming. She'd wake up, check her phone before her feet hit the floor, and immediately dive into whatever drama was unfolding in the group chat. Adrian was still having girlfriend problems. Apparently the coffee shop date had gone well, but now he was overthinking things. Blake was dealing with some work crisis that required constant emotional support. Jordan was planning a trip to Denver and needed Sabrina's input on everything from restaurants to hiking trails. I became a master of compartmentalization. During the day, I'd handle my current job responsibilities while secretly coordinating my escape plan. I'd schedule phone interviews with Chicago landlords during my break, research moving companies while eating lunch at my desk, and even take a couple of sick days to drive up there and look at apartments in person. The apartment I finally chose was perfect, a 1-bedroom in Lincoln Park with huge windows, hardwood floors, and a kitchen that was actually bigger than our current one. The landlord, Mrs. Chun, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who ran credit checks like she was vetting candidates for the CIA. When she approved my application, I felt this rush of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. This was really happening. First month's rent plus security deposit, she said over the phone. Move-in date January 1st. You sure you don't need to discuss this with your wife first? No, I said, and the word came out easier than it should have. This is my decision. The moving company was next. I called around and got quotes, settling on an outfit called Midwest Express that specialized in long-distance relocations. The guy I spoke with, Tony, was a straight shooter who'd heard every sob story in the book. Corporate relocation? He asked when I explained the situation. Something like that, I said. Wife going with you? No. There was a pause. One of those relocations. We do a lot of those. Don't worry, we're discreet. When you want us there? Saturday morning, early. Like 7 a.m. You got it. Cash or company check? Company check. Because corporate was paying for this move, which meant they were literally funding my escape from the marriage they didn't know was ending. The paperwork was the trickiest part. I had to change my address with the bank, redirect my mail, transfer my car registration, update my insurance. 1,000 little details that could tip off Sabrina if she was paying attention. But she wasn't. She was too busy playing therapist to three guys who lived in different time zones to notice that her husband was systematically erasing himself from their shared life. I started small with the belongings. A few books here, some old DVDs there. Stuff she'd never noticed was missing. I'd box things up and put them in my car, then store them in a storage unit I'd rented across town. Slowly but surely, I was reducing my footprint in our apartment without leaving any obvious gaps. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal. Coming home every day to watch her live her best life with Adrian, Blake, and Jordan while I planned my exit strategy. Sitting through dinners where she'd ignore me completely, knowing it was probably the last time I'd have to endure it. Making small talk about weekend plans when I knew that by the time those weekends rolled around, I'd be setting up a new life in Chicago. But you know what? It wasn't that hard to pretend, because the truth was, nothing was normal anymore. We weren't having real conversations, we weren't making future plans together, we weren't even watching the same TV shows. We were just two people who happened to share an apartment and a mortgage, living completely separate lives under the same roof. The closest call came about 3 weeks into my planning phase. I was on the phone with the moving company, finalizing some details about the truck size, when Sabrina walked into the kitchen. I quickly switched to talking about work inventory. Easy enough since logistics vocabulary is logistics vocabulary, whether you're moving auto parts or your entire life. Boring work stuff, I said when she looked at me questioningly. Home, she replied, already reaching for her phone. Crisis averted. By mid-December, everything was in place. The Chicago apartment was ready, the movers were scheduled, my job transition. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor so twisted that you can't help but appreciate the artistry of it all. I'd spent weeks planning the perfect moment to tell Sabrina about Chicago, over dinner, maybe, or during one of those rare moments when her phone wasn't surgically attached to her hand. I'd rehearsed different versions of the conversation, from gentle and apologetic to firm and final. What I hadn't planned on was my sister Leah blowing up my entire operation with a single Instagram post. It was a Thursday evening in mid-December, and I was in the kitchen pretending to care about the frozen pizza I'd thrown in the oven, while Sabrina held court on the couch with her digital harem. Standard weeknight routine. Me going through the motions of domestic life, while she lived her real life through a screen. I was actually feeling pretty good about myself, knowing that in just over 2 weeks, this pathetic charade would be over. That's when I heard it. Not the usual giggling or the rapid-fire typing that had become the soundtrack to our marriage. This was different. A sharp intake of breath, followed by complete silence. In a house where silence had become more rare than unicorns, that got my attention real fast. Marcus. Her voice cut through the kitchen like a knife. Not, hey babe, or honey, or any of the casual terms she used when she needed me to grab her something. Just my name, spoken like an accusation. I turned around, and the look on her face made my stomach drop. She was staring at her phone, but for once, she wasn't smiling. Her face had gone completely white, like she'd just seen a ghost. Or like she'd just discovered that her husband had been planning to ghost her. What's wrong? I asked, though I was already pretty sure I knew. She held up her phone, and there it was, Leah's Instagram story, posted about 20 minutes ago. A picture of a bottle of champagne with the caption, "So proud of my big brother. Chicago, here he comes. Party popper, new job, new city, new adventures. Hashtag proud sister, hashtag Chicago bound, hashtag new beginnings." Leah, bless her heart, had always been my biggest cheerleader. When I called to tell her about the promotion, she'd been over the moon, talking about how this was exactly what I needed and how excited she was for my fresh start. I'd mentioned that I hadn't told Sabrina yet, but apparently, Leah had assumed that conversation had happened by now. Oops. What? Sabrina said slowly. Is Leah talking about? I could have lied. Could have said it was a mistake, that Leah had misunderstood something, that there was no job in Chicago. But standing there, looking at my wife's shocked face, I realized I didn't want to lie anymore. I was tired of pretending, tired of tiptoeing around her feelings while she trampled all over mine. I got promoted, I said simply. I'm moving to Chicago. The silence that followed was deafening. I could actually hear the neighbor's TV through the wall, some game show where people were screaming about winning money. Meanwhile, in our apartment, you could have heard a pin drop. Moving, she repeated, like I'd just told her I was planning to colonize Mars. When were you going to tell me? I tried to tell you 3 weeks ago. You were busy. She blinked at me, confusion replacing the shock. 3 weeks ago? When? The night I came home with news. The night you told me to take my time because Adrian's dating life was more important than whatever I had to say. I watched her face as the memory hit her. The slight widening of her eyes, the way her mouth opened just a little. She remembered. She actually fucking remembered dismissing me that night, and now she was realizing what she'd dismissed. That was, you said never mind. You said to go back to my, she stopped herself, but we both knew what she'd been about to say. Go back to my boyfriends. Those had been my exact words. Yeah, I did say never mind. Because you made it crystal clear that whatever I had to say wasn't worth interrupting your texting session for. She was quiet for a long moment, her phone forgotten in her lap. This was probably the longest she'd gone without checking it in months. So you just decided to move to Chicago without talking to me about it? I decided to take a job that was offered to me. A really good job, actually. Operations manager, 40% pay increase, full relocation package. The kind of opportunity most people would be excited to share with their spouse. But you didn't share it with me. I tried. Jesus Christ, Sabrina, I tried to tell you, and you literally could not be bothered to listen. You were too busy playing relationship counselor to 3 guys who don't even live in the same state as us. Her phone buzzed. Her eyes immediately darted down to it, pure instinct, like a moth to a flame. For a split second, I saw her face start to change, saw that familiar smile beginning to form, and then she caught herself. She looked back up at me, but the damage was done. Even in the middle of the biggest fight of our marriage, she couldn't resist checking what the boys were up to. Are you seriously checking your phone right now? I asked. I wasn't. You just what? Saw a notification and couldn't help yourself? Even now? Even when you're supposedly shocked and upset that your husband is moving to Chicago? She set the phone face down on the couch, but I could see her fingers twitching toward it. This isn't about my phone. This is about you making a huge life decision without consulting me. Consulting you? I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. When exactly was I supposed to consult you? Between your morning check-in with Adrian and your afternoon therapy session with Blake? Or maybe during your evening comedy hour with Jordan? They're my friends. No, they're not. Friends don't monopolize every waking moment of your attention. Friends don't make you ignore your husband for months at a time. Friends don't become more important than your actual marriage. Her phone buzzed again. This time she didn't even glance at it, but I could see the effort it took. Her whole body was tense, like she was fighting every instinct she had. So what? You're just leaving? Just like that? Just like that? I confirmed. January 1st. The movers come Saturday morning. Saturday? This Saturday. Her voice cracked. Marcus, that's in 2 days. I know what day it is. You can't just. This is insane. We need to talk about this. We need to figure this out. Figure what out? How to make this work. How to save our marriage. I shook my head. Sabrina, when was the last time you looked at me? Really looked at me? For more than 30 seconds without checking your phone? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time, and I watched her physically restrain herself from reaching for it. That's what I thought, I said. You can't even go 5 minutes without wanting to see what they're saying. Even now, in the middle of this conversation, you're dying to know what's happening in that group chat. It's not what? True. Come on, Sabrina. Your phone has buzzed 3 times since we started talking, and you've looked at it every single time. You're sitting there fighting the urge to check it right now. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was smaller. I need advice. From who? She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. We both knew exactly who she wanted to ask for advice about her husband leaving her. Right, I said softly. You need advice from Adrian, Blake, and Jordan about how to handle the fact that your husband is tired of being treated like he doesn't exist. Her phone buzzed again. This time she cracked. She grabbed it and started typing, her fingers flying across the screen. I can't deal with this right now, she muttered without looking up. You're being crazy and impulsive, and I need to talk to people who actually care about my well-being. And there it was, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Her husband tells her he's moving to Chicago, and her first instinct is to text 3 other guys for advice. Not to fight for our relationship, not to ask what she could do to fix things, but to run straight to the same people who'd helped destroy our marriage in the first place. People who care about your well-being, I repeated. Right. I walked to the bedroom and started packing the rest of my clothes. From the living room, I could hear her typing furiously, probably laying out the whole situation for her digital support system, asking them what she should do, how she should handle this, whether I was being reasonable or not. But here's the funny thing about asking for advice from people who've never met your husband and only hear your side of the story. They're probably going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. And what Sabrina wanted to hear was that this was all my fault. Saturday morning arrived like the final boss battle in a video game you never wanted to play. I'd set my alarm for 6 a.m., planning to be up and caffeinated before the movers showed up at 7. What I hadn't planned on was waking up to the sound of multiple car doors slamming outside our apartment building at 6:15 in the fucking morning. I stumbled to the window and looked down at the parking lot, and what I saw made me wonder if I was still dreaming or having a nightmare. There was Sabrina's Honda Civic, which made sense since she lived here. But parked next to it was a black pickup truck I didn't recognize, a blue sedan that looked like a rental, and a yellow U-Haul truck that definitely hadn't been there when I went to bed. The cavalry had arrived. I threw on jeans and a t-shirt and padded to the living room, where I found Sabrina pacing back and forth like a caged tiger, her phone pressed to her ear. She was wearing the outfit she usually reserved for job interviews or court appearances: black slacks, white blouse, hair pulled back in a severe bun. War paint. They should be here any minute, she was saying into the phone. Did you guys get coffee? This is going to take a while. She spotted me lurking in the hallway and lowered the phone. We need to talk. About what? I thought we covered everything last night. About how we're going to split things up. Fairly. That was Rich. For 6 months, she'd been splitting her attention between me and 3 other guys, and I'd gotten maybe 20% of the total. Now she wanted to talk about fair. There's nothing to split, I said. Everything in this apartment is mine. I bought it. I paid for it. It's in my name. Her face went white. That's not. You can't just take everything. Watch me. That's when the doorbell rang. 7 a.m. on the dot. The movers were punctual. I'd give them that. I opened the door to find Tony from Midwest Express, a barrel-chested guy in his 40s with arms like tree trunks and the kind of mustache that belonged in a 1980s cop movie. Morning, Mr. Hill. Ready to get this show on the road? More than ready, I said. But before I could say anything else, I heard footsteps on the stairs behind Tony. Heavy footsteps. Multiple sets of them. And that's when Sabrina's reinforcements made their grand entrance. First up the stairs was Adrian. Tall, lean, with that carefully disheveled hipster hair that probably took him an hour to achieve and a beard that screamed, "I'm sensitive and artistic." He was wearing designer jeans and a flannel shirt that cost more than my monthly car payment. Right behind him came Blake, shorter and stockier, with the kind of gym bro build that suggested he spent more time taking selfies than actually lifting weights. And bringing up the rear was Jordan, who looked exactly like what you'd get if you ordered generic white guy from a catalog. But the real surprise was the 4th person in their little war party, Kaylee, Sabrina's best friend since college, carrying what appeared to be a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone who was about to conduct a very serious business meeting. "Gentlemen," Tony said, looking confused. "We gonna have a problem here?" "No problem," I said quickly. "Just some observers." Adrian stepped forward, and I got my first good look at the guy who'd been monopolizing my wife's attention for 6 months. He was exactly what I'd expected, the kind of dude who probably used words like problematic in casual conversation and had strong opinions about artisanal coffee. "Hey man," he said, extending his hand like we were old friends meeting for brunch. "I'm Adrian. We need to talk about this whole situation." I looked at his outstretched hand like it was a dead fish. "No, we really don't." "Marcus," Sabrina said, stepping between us. "These are my friends. They're here to help us work this out like adults." "Work what out?" "I'm moving." End of story. Blake, apparently deciding it was his turn to play mediator, stepped forward. "Look, bro, we know you're upset, but you can't just take everything. Sabrina's been contributing to this household too." "Bro." He actually called me bro. I felt my eyes start to twitch. "Contributing how?" I asked. "By ignoring me for 6 months while she texted you guys? By turning our marriage into a group chat? Yeah, that's some real valuable contribution right there." Jordan, not to be outdone by his buddies, decided to weigh in. "Dude, That's not fair. Sabrina's been going through a lot, and we've just been supporting her as friends. Supporting her. Right. Because what every marriage needs is 3 guys on standby to provide emotional support when the actual husband becomes inconvenient. Tony was looking back and forth between all of us like he was watching a tennis match. Mr. Hill, my crew's gonna be here any minute. We need to know what we're moving and what we're leaving. Everything, I said. We're moving everything. That's not happening, Kaylee announced, consulting her clipboard. Sabrina has just as much right to the furniture and household items as you do. I stared at her. Does she? Because I'm pretty sure when you buy something with your own money, it belongs to you. Marriage doesn't work that way, Adrian said, like he was some kind of legal expert. Community property laws. We live in a separate property state, I interrupted. And we don't have any joint assets. Everything in this apartment is in my name because I bought it with my money. Don't be petty, man, Blake said, shaking his head. She gave you 3 good years. She deserves something. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not the quiet, controlled snap from Thursday night, but a loud, explosive snap that echoed through the apartment like a gunshot. Gave me. I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. Gave me 3 good years. Blake nodded, clearly thinking he'd made a reasonable point. Yeah, man. 3 years of marriage. That's worth something. 3 years of marriage, I said slowly. Let me tell you what those 3 years were worth. The first 2.5 were great. Amazing, even. I was married to a woman who actually gave a shit about my existence. But the last 6 months? The last 6 months, she gave you 3 good years. You got her attention, her emotional energy, her best smiles and laughs. You got the woman I married while I got whatever was left over. That's not. Adrian started. Shut up, I said, and something in my tone made him take a step back. You don't get to talk. Any of you. You want to know what petty looks like? Petty would be me sending screenshots of all your late-night conversations to your girlfriends. Petty would be me posting about how 3 grown men spent 6 months emotionally manipulating my wife into ignoring her marriage. Petty would be me making this as difficult and embarrassing as possible for everyone involved. The apartment went dead silent. Even Sabrina stopped typing on her phone. But I'm not going to do that, I continued. You know why? Because I'm not petty. I'm practical. And practically speaking, you guys won the prize. You wanted her attention? Congratulations, it's all yours now. You wanted her emotional investment? She's all yours. You wanted to be the most important people in her life? Mission fucking accomplished. Tony cleared his throat. Mr. Hill, the crew's here. I looked out the window and saw the Midwest Express truck pulling into the parking lot, followed by 2 more guys in company uniforms. Game time. Everything goes, I told Tony. Furniture, electronics, kitchen stuff, everything. If there's any confusion about ownership, these nice people have my credit card statements in their car that show every purchase made in the last 3 years. You actually brought receipts? Jordan asked, looking incredulous. I'm a logistics coordinator, I said. I keep receipts for everything. And that was true. In my car, I had a folder with 3 years' worth of credit card statements, purchase receipts, and delivery confirmations. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every dish and spoon in this apartment could be traced back to my bank account. Sabrina finally looked up from her phone. Marcus, please. Can we just what? Work something out? Come to a compromise? Maybe split things 50-50 even though you contributed exactly $0 to any of it. I contributed in other ways, she said weakly. Like what? Emotional support? Because I hate to break it to you, but for the last 6 months, you've been giving that away for free to 3 guys who don't even live here. The movers were already at work, wrapping furniture and loading boxes. Tony had his crew moving with military precision. These guys clearly knew what they were doing. Meanwhile, Sabrina's support group was standing around looking like they'd expected some kind of negotiation and instead walked into a hostile takeover. This is insane, Kaylee said, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. You can't just take the couch. Sabrina sleeps on that couch. Not my problem, I said. Maybe one of her boyfriends has a couch she can crash on. Adrian's face flushed red. They're not her boyfriends. Aren't they? Because you sure as hell act like boyfriends. You get her undivided attention. You're the first people she wants to talk to when something happens. You're the ones she turns to for emotional support. The only difference between you and actual boyfriends is that she's not fucking you. Yet, Blake added under his breath, and immediately looked like he regretted saying it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Sabrina's face went white. Yet. I repeated. Did this motherfucker just say yet? Blake held up his hands. I didn't mean. No, I think you meant exactly what you said. Because that's what this has all been about, hasn't it? 3 guys playing the long game. Waiting for her marriage to fall apart, so you could swoop in and be the heroes who picked up the pieces. That's not true, Sabrina said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you guys got exactly what you wanted. You helped destroy my marriage, and now you get to comfort the poor abandoned wife. Congratulations, gentlemen. You played the game perfectly. One of the movers, a young guy who couldn't have been more than 20, paused in the middle of wrapping our TV. Boss, this is getting pretty heavy. Should we keep working? Tony said firmly. We're professionals. We don't get involved in domestic situations. Smart man. This was exactly the kind of clusterfuck that could turn ugly fast. Adrian tried one more time. Look, Marcus, we're all adults here. We can work this out. We're all adults? I laughed. Adults don't spend 6 months undermining someone's marriage and then show up on moving day to claim the moral high ground. Adults would have told their friend to put down the phone and talk to her husband. Adults would have recognized that a married woman probably shouldn't be texting 3 guys more than she talks to her spouse. She's yours now, I said, looking directly at the 3 of them. All yours. Enjoy game night. And with that, I walked out of the apartment, leaving them to watch the movers systematically dismantle the life I'd built with a woman who'd chosen everyone but me. The best part? Even as her entire world was being loaded into a truck, I could see Sabrina checking her phone. Some habits never die. The drive to Chicago was 8 hours and 17 minutes of pure, uninterrupted silence, and it was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. No buzzing phones, no giggling at inside jokes I wasn't part of, no competing with 3 digital boyfriends for basic human acknowledgement. Just me, my car, and the open road stretching out ahead like a promise of better things to come. I'd loaded up a playlist of podcasts for the trip, some business stuff, a few true crime episodes, and a comedy special that actually made me laugh out loud for the first time in weeks. Real laughter, not the bitter, sarcastic chuckle that had become my default response to the absurdity of my marriage. It felt good to remember what genuine amusement felt like. Around hour 4, somewhere between Indianapolis and Gary, my phone started buzzing with texts. I didn't even glance at it. Whatever Sabrina and her support group were plotting could wait until I was safely in my new apartment. For the first time in 6 months, I was exactly where I wanted to be, alone with my thoughts, heading toward a future that belonged entirely to me. The Chicago skyline appeared around sunset, all gleaming towers and possibility, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in ages, excitement. Not the nervous, anxious excitement of wondering if your wife was going to acknowledge your existence that evening, but the pure, electric excitement of starting over. Clean slate, fresh beginning, new life. My apartment was everything I'd hoped it would be and more. Mrs. Chin met me at the building entrance with the keys and a no-nonsense handshake. Welcome to Chicago, Mr. Hill. The movers said they'd be here tomorrow morning. Perfect, I said, and meant it. The place was stunning. Hardwood floors that gleamed in the evening light, huge windows overlooking Lincoln Park, a kitchen that was bigger than my entire old bedroom. But the best part? The silence. Beautiful, golden silence that belonged to me and no one else. No group chat notifications, no video calls with emotional support bros, no constant digital chatter drowning out my own thoughts. I ordered pizza from a place down the street, deep dish, because when in Rome, and sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating straight from the box and planning my new life. Tomorrow the furniture would arrive. Monday I'd start my new job, and never again would I have to compete with a phone for attention in my own home. The movers arrived bright and early Sunday morning. Same crew as yesterday, but in much better moods. No relationship drama to navigate, just straight-up logistics. Tony supervised while his guys reassembled my life in a space that actually felt like home. Nice place, Tony said as we watched them set up my TV. Big upgrade from the old apartment. Yeah, I said. Fresh start. Those always work out better than people think, he said knowingly. Had a lot of clients in your situation. Most of them tell me later it was the best decision they ever made. Monday morning came fast, and walking into the new distribution center felt like stepping into the future. The facility was massive, 3 times the size of the old place, with state-of-the-art equipment and a team that actually seemed excited to be there. My new boss, Sarah Martinez, was Dave's sister and twice as sharp. "Welcome to the big leagues, Marcus," she said during my orientation. "Hope you're ready to hit the ground running." I was more than ready. For the first time in years, I had a job that matched my qualifications and ambitions. Operations manager. My own office. A team of 20 people who would actually listen when I spoke instead of half listening while texting other people. The work was challenging in all the right ways. Complex logistics problems that required real solutions, not just busy work to fill the day. I threw myself into it completely, staying late to learn the systems, coming in early to review reports. When you don't have a wife ignoring you at home, it's amazing how much energy you have for your career. That's where I met Rachel. She worked in accounting, 3 floors up from my office, and I probably would have never crossed paths with her if the elevator hadn't broken down on a Tuesday afternoon. We ended up walking down 8 flights of stairs together, and by the time we reached the lobby, I realized I'd just had the longest uninterrupted conversation with a woman in months. "Coffee sometime?" she asked as we reached the parking garage. "There's this great place around the corner that actually knows how to make a decent latte." Rachel was everything Sabrina wasn't. Focused, present, engaged. When she talked to you, she looked at you, not over your shoulder at her phone, not with half her attention on some digital conversation happening elsewhere. She looked at you like you were the most interesting thing in the room. Our first coffee date lasted 2 hours, and she never once checked her phone. Not once. I kept waiting for it. The familiar buzz, the apologetic glance down, the sorry, just 1 second, that would stretch into 10 minutes. It never came. Her phone stayed in her purse, and her attention stayed on me. "So what brought you to Chicago?" she asked, stirring sugar into her latte. "New job." "Something like that," I said. "Fresh start." She nodded like she understood completely. "I did the same thing last year. Sometimes you just need to shake up your whole life, you know?" I knew exactly what she meant. We started having coffee regularly, then lunch, then dinner, and every single time, it was the same thing. Real conversation with someone who was actually present for it. She'd tell me about her day, ask about mine, and when I answered, she'd listen. Really listen. Not the polite nodding while thinking about something else kind of listening, but the engaged, asking follow-up questions kind of listening that made you feel like what you had to say actually mattered. Meanwhile, my phone had become refreshingly quiet. A few missed calls from Sabrina the first week, which I'd ignored. Some texts that I deleted without reading. But mostly, blessed silence. It was like being released from prison after serving time for a crime you didn't commit. The only contact I maintained with my old life was through Leah, who'd call every few weeks to check in. That's how I found out what was happening back home. And let me tell you, the updates were fucking priceless. "So Sabrina's been posting all over social media," Leah told me during one of our calls. "Lots of stuff about being a strong, independent woman and surrounding herself with people who really support her." "Good for her," I said, and meant it. "How are her support people working out?" Leah laughed. "Well, that's the interesting part. Turns out Adrian, Blake, and Jordan are great at providing emotional support via text message, but not so much when it comes to actual real-world help." "What do you mean?" "I mean, none of them offered her a place to stay. She's been crashing on Kaylee's couch for 3 months now, and from what I hear, that's not going great either." I felt a little spark of satisfaction at that news. All those months of being the most important people in her world, and when she actually needed them, they were nowhere to be found. Funny how that works. "And get this," Leah continued. "Remember Blake? The gym bro who called you petty for taking your own furniture? Hard to forget him. Well, apparently he got back together with his ex-girlfriend last month. Now he's too busy to participate in the group chat as much." Sabrina posted some passive-aggressive thing about fair weather friends last week. The irony was beautiful. Blake had been one of her emotional support trinity, always available for deep conversations and constant validation. But the moment he had a girlfriend again, suddenly he didn't have time for Sabrina's drama. Kind of like how she hadn't had time for her husband when she had 3 guys giving her attention. What about Adrian and Jordan? Jordan took that job in Denver and basically disappeared. Last I heard, he's dating some ski instructor and has gone full Colorado bro. And Adrian? Leah paused. Adrian's the best part. You remember how he was always having girlfriend problems? How could I forget? That was like half their conversations. Well, he finally worked things out with the coffee shop girl. They're engaged now. Guess he doesn't need relationship advice from Sabrina anymore. So there it was. The holy trinity of emotional support had completely disbanded, leaving Sabrina with exactly what she'd given me for 6 months. Nothing. Adrian was engaged, Blake was back with his ex, and Jordan had moved on to a whole new life. The guys who'd been so important that she'd ignored her husband for them had all found better things to do. She keeps asking about you, Leah said. Wants to know how you're doing, if you're seeing anyone, whether you've mentioned her at all. What do you tell her? The truth. That you're happy. And I was happy. Genuinely, authentically happy for the first time in almost a year. I had a job I loved, an apartment that felt like home, and a woman who actually wanted to spend time with me. Rachel and I had been dating for 2 months, and it was everything a relationship should be. Easy, comfortable, fun. She made me laugh. I made her laugh, and when we were together, neither of us felt the need to escape into our phones. The contrast was stark. With Sabrina, I'd spent months feeling like I was auditioning for her attention every day and failing. With Rachel, I never had to audition for anything. She wanted to be there, wanted to hear about my day, wanted to share hers with me. It was like remembering how to breathe after months of holding your breath. One evening in late spring, Rachel and I were having dinner at a little Italian place near my apartment when she said something that stopped me cold. You know what I love about you, Marcus? What's that? You're present. Like, really present. When you're with someone, you're actually with them. It's rare these days. Present. The word hit me like a lightning bolt. That's what had been missing with Sabrina, what I've been trying to articulate for months but couldn't quite put my finger on. Presence. The simple act of being fully engaged with the person right in front of you, instead of living half your life through a screen. Thank you, I said, and I meant it more than she could possibly know. For what? For being present too. She smiled and reached across the table to take my hand. Always. That night, walking back to my apartment with Rachel's hand in mine, I realized something profound. I'd spent so long thinking my marriage had failed because I wasn't enough. Not interesting enough, not funny enough, not worthy enough of Sabrina's attention. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. My marriage had failed because my wife had chosen not to be present for it. And now I was with someone who chose differently. Someone who put down her phone when I walked in the room, who asked about my day and listened to the answer, who laughed at my jokes and shared her own stories. Someone who understood that love isn't just about being in the same room. It's about being in the same moment. For the first time since this whole mess started, I felt genuinely grateful. Not just for escaping a bad situation, but for landing in a good one. Sometimes the universe has to tear your life apart before it can put it back together properly. And sometimes, being alone turns out to be the first step toward finding the right person to not be alone with. 6 months into my new life in Chicago, I thought I was done dealing with the wreckage of my old one. I was wrong. Desperation, it turns out, has a way of following you across state lines, and it arrived at my doorstep in the most pathetic way possible, through my sister's living room. It was a Thursday evening in late June when Leah called, and I could tell immediately from her tone that this wasn't going to be one of our usual check-in conversations. There was an edge to her voice, a careful quality that meant she was about to deliver news I probably didn't want to hear. So, she said after we'd gotten through the pleasantries about my job and Rachel, I had an interesting visitor today. I was sitting on my couch, takeout containers spread across my coffee table, watching the Cubs lose to the Cardinals. Rachel was working late, so I'd planned a quiet evening of baseball and leftover Thai food. Peaceful. Predictable. Everything my old life hadn't been. Oh yeah? Who was that? Sabrina. The name hit me like a fastball to the chest. I muted the TV and sat up straighter. Sabrina came to your house? Showed up around 2 this afternoon. Looking. Leah paused, searching for the right word. Rough. Really rough, Marcus. Like she hasn't been sleeping or eating properly. I almost didn't recognize her. I tried to picture it. Sabrina, who'd always been meticulous about her appearance, showing up disheveled at my sister's door. Part of me felt a flicker of something that might have been concern, but it was quickly overwhelmed by a much stronger emotion, irritation. Even from 800 miles away, she was still finding ways to insert drama into my life. What did she want? To talk. About you, obviously. Leah sighed. She's in bad shape, Marcus. Really bad shape. She's been sleeping on Kaylee's couch for 6 months now, and apparently, that situation is falling apart. Kaylee's getting married in the fall and wants Sabrina out. She can't afford her own place on her salary, and her parents are refusing to help because they think she's made her bed and needs to lie in it. Good for them, I thought. Apparently, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson had more sense than their daughter. And her support system? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Gone. All of them. Adrian's wedding is next month. Turns out the coffee shop girl was the one all along. Blake's moved in with his girlfriend and barely responds to texts anymore. And Jordan. Leah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Jordan blocked her on social media last month because his new girlfriend got jealous of how much they were texting. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. The 3 guys who'd been so important that she'd sacrificed her marriage for them had all moved on to their real lives, leaving her exactly where she'd left me, ignored, dismissed, and alone. The universe had a sense of justice after all. So what did she want from you? Information, mostly. Your address, your phone number, whether you were seeing anyone. She kept saying she'd made a terrible mistake and needed to talk to you. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're happy, that you're dating someone wonderful, and that she needs to leave you alone and move on with her life. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Leah. She'd always been protective of me, but this went beyond sibling loyalty. This was her recognizing that some bridges needed to stay burned. How did she take that? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of crying, lots of begging me to give her your contact information. She said she just needed 5 minutes to explain, to apologize, to make things right. I told her that ship had sailed, but apparently, telling Sabrina to move on was easier said than done. Because 3 days later, I opened my email to find a message from an address I didn't recognize, truthseeker2023@gmail.com. The subject line read, "Please read this, S." For a moment, I considered deleting it without opening it. My life was good now, great actually. Rachel and I were talking about her moving in with me in the fall. Work was going better than I'd ever hoped. I was sleeping through the night without checking my phone, waking up looking forward to the day ahead instead of dreading whatever fresh hell awaited me. Why invite the chaos back in? But curiosity won out. I opened the email. It was a novel. 5 pages of single-spaced text, a rambling manifesto of regret and self-pity that read like someone having a mental breakdown in real time. She talked about how she'd been in therapy, how she'd realized she'd made terrible mistakes, how she'd been manipulated by toxic friends who'd convinced her to prioritize the wrong things. Manipulated. That was rich. As if Adrian, Blake, and Jordan had held a gun to her head and forced her to ignore her husband for 6 months. As if she hadn't made the conscious choice, every single day, to pick up her phone instead of engaging with the man sitting next to her. The email went on, filled with phrases like journey of self-discovery and growth mindset and other therapy speak buzzwords that sounded like she'd been reading too many self-help books. She talked about how she wanted to rebuild trust and start fresh, and how she was willing to move to Chicago to fight for our love. Fight for our love. Jesus Christ. The most pathetic part was her detailed plan for winning me back. She'd researched apartments in Chicago, looked into job opportunities, even identified couples therapists in the area. She'd apparently spent months planning this grand gesture. This romantic comeback story where the wayward wife realizes her mistakes and sweeps her husband off his feet with her newfound commitment. It was delusional on a level that was almost impressive. I forwarded the email to Rachel with a simple message. Check this out. My ex-wife has lost her damn mind. Rachel's response came back 15 minutes later. Holy shit. This woman is completely unhinged. 5 pages. 5 pages. Who has time to write 5 pages of crazy? We ended up reading it together that night over wine, and I have to admit, it was pretty entertaining when viewed as a piece of unintentional comedy. Rachel did dramatic readings of the most ridiculous parts, complete with overwrought hand gestures and fake tears. I now realize that our love was a garden that I allowed to wither through neglect, Rachel intoned in a theatrical voice. But gardens can be replanted, Marcus. Hearts can heal. Love can bloom again if we're both willing to tend to it with the care it deserves. She actually wrote that. I said, shaking my head. A grown woman, presumably sober, sat down and wrote that sentence. I've been seeing a therapist who specializes in relationship repair, Rachel continued. She says that what we had was real and special, and that it's worth fighting for. She says that sometimes people have to lose everything to realize what they had. Translation: her therapist has never met me and is only hearing one side of the story. Obviously, no therapist who knew the whole situation would encourage this stalker behavior. My response to Sabrina was considerably shorter than her email. 2 sentences. Please don't contact me again. I wish you the best. But that wasn't the end of it. Because when email didn't work, she tried LinkedIn. Fucking LinkedIn. She sent me a professional connection request with a message asking if we could discuss opportunities for collaboration in our shared professional space. I blocked her immediately and screenshot the message to send to Rachel, who laughed so hard she nearly choked on her coffee. She's trying to slide into your DMs through a professional networking site, Rachel wheezed. That's a new level of desperate. Then came the phone calls to my office. My assistant, Jennifer, started getting calls from someone claiming to be my business partner who needed to discuss urgent financial matters. It took me 3 days to figure out it was Sabrina, using different names and slightly altered voices. Should I call security? Jennifer asked after the 5th call in 2 days. No, just put her on the permanent block list. And if she shows up in person, call me immediately. The whole thing was exhausting and infuriating in equal measure. Here I was, 800 miles away, living my best life with an amazing woman who actually gave a shit about me, and my ex-wife was still finding ways to create chaos. It was like she couldn't stand the idea that I was happy without her, that I'd moved on and found something better. But the more desperate she became, the clearer it made everything. This wasn't love, this was possession. This wasn't someone who missed her husband. This was someone who missed having a husband, period. The difference was crucial. Because if she'd really loved me, really valued our relationship, she would have put down the phone 6 months ago when I asked her to. She would have chosen presence over texting, reality over fantasy, her marriage over her digital playground. Instead, she'd chosen Adrian, Blake, and Jordan. And now that they were gone, now that her backup plan had fallen through, she wanted me to be her backup plan. Not a chance in hell. You know what the saddest part is? I told Rachel as we deleted yet another email from yet another fake account. What's that? If she'd fought this hard for our marriage when we were actually married, we might still be together. Rachel nodded thoughtfully, but she didn't. And now you know what it feels like to be with someone who chooses you first instead of treating you like a consolation prize. She was right. Whatever Sabrina was offering now, therapy, grand gestures, promises of change, it was too little, too late. I'd already found what I'd been looking for. I just hadn't been looking for it with her. A year later, Rachel moved in with me, and it was like watching my life click into focus for the first time in years. No drama, no negotiations, no grand gestures, just 2 people who wanted to build something together, making the practical decision to do it. The whole process took exactly 1 conversation and a weekend with a U-Haul. Are you sure about this? I asked her as we carried boxes up to my apartment. Living with someone is a big step. People change when they're sharing space. She laughed, setting down a box marked kitchen stuff in what was now our kitchen. Marcus, I've seen you at your worst. Hungover on a Sunday morning, stressed about work deadlines, trying to assemble IKEA furniture. If I can handle that, I think we'll be fine. She was right. We were more than fine. We were great. The contrast to my previous living situation was stark. Rachel's belongings integrated seamlessly with mine, her books sliding in next to mine on the shelves, her coffee mug finding a home next to mine in the cabinet. When she rearranged the living room furniture to create better flow, it made sense. When she suggested we replace my bachelor pad artwork with something more sophisticated, I was grateful for her input. This was what partnership looked like. 2 people making decisions together, considering each other's preferences, building something that belonged to both of us instead of one person imposing their will on the other. 3 months after Rachel moved in, I brought her home to meet my parents. The drive to Milwaukee was pleasant, Rachel navigating while I drove, the 2 of us talking about everything and nothing, her phone tucked away in her purse where it stayed for the entire 3-hour trip. My parents were waiting on the front porch when we pulled up, and I could see my mom's face light up with curiosity. She'd heard about Rachel, of course, but this was the first time they'd meet in person. After the disaster that was my marriage, I knew they were probably holding their breath, hoping this one would work out better. Dinner was perfect. Rachel charmed my dad with questions about his work, helped my mom in the kitchen without being asked, and generally fit into our family dynamic like she'd been part of it for years. But it was my mom's comment, made quietly while Rachel was helping clear the table, that really drove home how different this relationship was. "It's nice to see someone look at you while you're talking," she said, her voice soft but pointed. Those words hit me like a freight train. It's nice to see someone look at you while you're talking. Such a simple thing, such a basic courtesy, and yet it had been missing from my marriage for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like. With Sabrina, conversations had become performances where I competed with a phone for audience attention. Even when she was physically present, mentally she was somewhere else, living her real life through a screen while I tried desperately to matter in my own home. With Rachel, conversations were actual conversations. She listened, responded, engaged. When I told her about my day, she asked follow-up questions. When she shared stories from her work, I was the only audience she needed. We could sit on the couch for hours, talking about everything from current events to childhood memories, and neither of us felt the urge to check our phones or escape into digital distractions. "She's wonderful," my mom said later, after Rachel had gone to bed. "Really wonderful. You seem happy." "Actually happy." "I am," I said, and meant it completely. The news about Sabrina came sporadically through Leah, who'd become my unofficial intelligence source on my former life. The updates painted a picture of someone whose life had completely fallen apart after the people she'd prioritized over her marriage had moved on to their own lives. She'd moved back in with her parents after Kaylee's wedding, a 32-year-old woman sleeping in her childhood bedroom because she couldn't afford her own place. The job market in our old town was limited, and her resume, coordinator at a small nonprofit, wasn't exactly setting the world on fire. Adrian was married now, Blake was engaged, and Jordan had apparently started his own business in Denver. The holy trinity of emotional support had disbanded, leaving Sabrina with exactly what she'd given me for the last 6 months of our marriage. Nothing. "She asked about you again," Leah told me during one of our monthly calls. "Wanted to know if you were happy, if you ever mentioned missing her." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're building a life with someone who actually appreciates you." And that was the truth. Rachel and I were building something real, something sustainable, something based on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than digital distractions and emotional manipulation. We were planning a future together, talking about buying a house, maybe getting a dog, taking that trip to Europe we'd been dreaming about. You know what I learned from all this? I told Rachel one evening as we sat on our couch, her feet in my lap while we watched some mindless comedy special. "What's that? Love isn't about grand gestures or passionate declarations or even chemistry. It's about presence. It's about choosing to be fully engaged with the person right in front of you instead of always looking for something better somewhere else." She squeezed my hand. Presence is underrated. Sabrina never understood that. She thought love was about feelings, about excitement, about having multiple people validate her worth. But love is actually much simpler. It's about showing up every day, for the boring conversations and the exciting ones, for the mundane moments and the special occasions, for the person, not just the idea of the person, Rachel added. Exactly. 6 months later, I proposed to Rachel in our living room on a random Tuesday night. No elaborate planning, no grand romantic gesture, just a simple question asked during a commercial break of the show we were watching together. "Will you marry me?" I asked, pulling out the ring I'd been carrying around for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Yes," she said without hesitation, and then we both started laughing because it was so beautifully ordinary, so perfectly us. "We're getting married next spring in a small ceremony with just our families and closest friends. No drama, no complications, no digital distractions. Just 2 people who choose each other every single day, making it official." Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd stayed, if I'd continued trying to compete with 3 guys and a phone for my wife's attention. I probably would have spent years feeling invisible, unheard, unimportant. I would have convinced myself that asking for basic respect was unreasonable, that wanting my spouse's attention was selfish. Instead, I learned something invaluable. When someone shows you their priorities, believe them. When silence speaks louder than their words, listen to it. And when being alone becomes preferable to being ignored, it's time to choose yourself. The best revenge against someone who treated you like you didn't matter isn't anger or bitterness. It's building a life so good that you're grateful they showed you who they really were before it was too late. Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is the clarity to walk away.